Good morning. Good morning. This is Mark Rader. I'm here in Lima, Peru. It's hot down here, and we're just having a great time here in the summer. And I want to share a devotional with you, something we shared about with on Sunday morning about the determination of God. And I really think it'll be a blessing to you. And I was really thinking mighty heavy, put a lot into my Bible study for the doctrine of Balaam on Friday. And after Friday, I was thinking, you know what? I'm wondering if I should continue my English. And obviously our church isn't in English, but just wanting to be a blessing. But the Sunday morning, I receive a message from somebody. Somebody sent me a message. I won't say who, but if you're watching, man, thank you for that message. Somebody sent me a private message and just talking about what the Bible study meant to you and that it encouraged you to keep reading the Bible. And I needed that. Thank you. Thank you for that message. I needed that. And so now I'm determined to finish the year. I started these Bible studies, these devotionals during the week, Monday through Friday, at the end of last May. So towards the end of May will mark. I think it actually was May 24th, if I'm not mistaken. But that's when we started doing these. So I am determined to finish a full year of these devotions. And so if you'd like me to continue, please let me know. But so I'm going to keep doing these at least to complete one full year in English. Now in Spanish, we've got plenty of viewers in Spanish, so I'm going to keep doing it in Spanish. But anyway, so if you're with me this morning, put a comment in the comments, and that'll come to me through this. With this program, I can only see those who comment. If you don't comment, I can't see you. I can't see your icon and like Facebook Live, because I'm not going through Facebook Live. We're on Facebook and YouTube this morning with a different program. We're using Restream.io. But thank you so much for being with me this morning. Let's get started on talking about the determination of God. I'm going to talk about this passage here. I use this e-sword because honestly, I'm not going to sit around and make a PowerPoint presentation every morning. I've got other things to do besides morning devotions, and I've got other devotions that I have with the family and with my wife and I. And so we got a lot going on here. But I wanted to this program is a free download. It's e-sword, electronic sword, and sword as in sword of the Lord. But you can download it for free, and you can learn it. There's tutorials online about it. But I love it. It's quick. It's easy. And Daniel chapter 9 and verse number 24 is a great prophecy. Now, I'm not going to talk about the prophetic part of this passage. I just want to mention one thing that we can learn about God here. In verse number 24, it says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Talking about Israel and the holy city, talking about Jerusalem. Now, determined by whom? By whom are these 70 weeks determined upon Israel and upon Jerusalem? They're determined by God. God has promised it. He's giving a prophecy. Understand that whatever prophecy that God offers is a promise. By its very nature, it's a promise. And so when God promises something, he's going to complete it. And we see that God, in his great determination, has determined to complete every prophecy. Now, it's not just something automatic. It's God putting everything in place on purpose, orchestrating it by his own free will and his own effort to make sure it happens in spite of all the opposition, the adversity, and the adversary that worketh against him. He still completes his word. And it's just amazing, the determination of God. And this is a great prophecy. And God's saying from the beginning and towards the end, he is determined and he will complete this prophecy, because it talks about Jesus as well. And all the way through the end times, it says, and that, in the last phrase in the last verse in the chapter says, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. And Christ is determined. God is determined to complete his word. And so we see here that God is determined to do so. The determination of God, it's he's free to determine it. And honestly, he doesn't control us. We're free to make our decisions. Everyone is free to make their own decisions, and how much we prove that. Christians don't automatically follow the Lord. That's why they backslid so terribly. And heathens and people who don't want anything to do with God, God haters, everything that they do against God still doesn't hinder his will being done. God can get his will done with us or against us, and because he's determined to do so. And I don't want to be against the determination of God, definitely. Brother Bain, good morning. Good morning. So I want to show you this really great verse in Isaiah, and I hope you enjoy seeing these verses and reading them. It says, Isaiah chapter 14 and verse number, let's scroll up here to verse number 27. It says, for the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? And God is purposed. He is determined. When God is purposed to do something, he is determined to do it. And in Spanish, it uses that word determined for purpose. God has established, you know what? I'm doing this. I'm going to do it. And we're talking about what God does, his actions, his will, what he wants to do. Nobody can hinder God from doing what he wants to do. Now, how does that apply to us? Well, the best example of how that applies to us is with Christ. Mark chapter 9, I want to show you here in Mark chapter 9, and let's scroll down here to verse number 31. Verse number 30, I hope I'm not making you dizzy with all the scrolling. It says right here, verse number 31, for he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And after that he is killed, he shall rise the third day. We see the determination of Christ himself, that he shall rise. Christ is saying, this is what I'm going to do. And we see that Christ was able to keep his promises unto the grave, and even beyond the grave, Christ was able to keep his promises. Now, that's some pretty big faithfulness right there. That's some pretty incredible fidelity. We shouldn't say incredible, because it's very believable, because he did it in the physical realm. He rose from the dead corporally. He rose from the dead bodily, physically. He rose. That's why he had to be buried. And that's why he rose from the third day, to prove that he rose in the flesh. And Mark chapter 10, and all this shows his determination, what he is determined to complete. Verse number 34. Mark 10, verse number 34, it says, and they shall mock him, and shall scourge him, and shall spit upon him, and shall kill him, and the third day he shall rise again. Speaking of himself. And it's really interesting, talking even about the details of what he will have to suffer. And all of it came to pass. And Christ determined what he would do. And he was determined to rise from the dead, and so he did. And this is just phenomenal. I want to go a little bit further here. Now, I said Christ is our example here in his determination. As God is determined to complete the free will of God, what he decides to do, Christ also has a free will, independent from the Father's free will. He says, can I prove that? Yes. Let's go on here. And two more verses I want to share you. Stay with me on both of them. You're going to see something just marvelous here. Luke chapter 22. God the Father did not control the Son as a robot. I mean, he was free to make his own decisions, even though he is the same person of God. Wow, the Trinity is amazing. Luke 22, verse number 22, it says, "And truly the Son of Man goeth, and it was determined, as it was determined. But woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed." Now, Judas was free to make his decisions. And that's why Christ spent a lot of time advising against him, saying, listen, man, I know one of you is a devil. I know which one it is. He's saying, and he gives so many warnings. Why? Why did he give those warnings? If Judas was just automatically going to betray him, there's no reason to warn him. His destiny is already sealed, but it wasn't sealed. Judas was free to make his own decisions. And Christ was trying to warn him, listen, Christ is going to be delivered into the hands of sinners. He says, woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. He says, it doesn't have to be Judas. It could have been somebody else. Christ was not short on enemies. He wasn't lacking in enemies. Anybody could have done it. But it didn't have to be Judas. But Judas decided to do so. And Christ is saying, that's not my focus here. The first part of the verse says, and truly the Son of Man goeth, as it was determined. Now he's saying the Son of Man's going to go, as God the Father has determined that I do, I will do so. And he chooses to complete the same and to have the same determination as the Father. The best example of this is Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26 and verse number 42. Matthew chapter 26. Let's keep scrolling here. Here we go. Verse number 42. And he went away again and prayed, again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. What is he saying? What is he saying? He's showing the independent will of the Father versus the will of the Son. And Christ is our perfect example, having a free will and being able to make our decisions and do so. He's saying, listen, I know I'm free to make my own decisions. So if there is another way that I don't have to suffer Calvary, but you know what? Not about my will. It's about not my will, but thine be done, as he said in other passages. And he says, I believe it's in the same passage, if I'm not sure. Yes, verse number 39, it says, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Will. I will, thou wilt. Two different wills. And this is the beauty of the Holy Trinity, how the Father and the Son have their own will. And yet Christ and God the Father and God the Son put their wills together and had perfect harmony and perfect unity with their wills until death, even the death of the crucifixion. Their wills were perfectly matched together and perfectly the same determination and complete obedience. Christ had to obey, and he obeyed his Father, having his own independent will. Do you understand how much God put himself to the vulnerability of his own design? Understand that we are made in the image of God. As God has a free will, Christ has a free will, and we have a free will. And as God determines to complete his will, Christ was determined to complete the Father's will. He kept all of his own promises, but he lived to complete the will of his Father. And of course, he was blessed for doing so. And now we see here that our will is the same. We are free to make our own decisions. As the two thieves on the cross, one chose to humble himself and repent of his sin and beg for mercy. And he was saved in that very moment, as Christ said. And the other one chose to mock and to scorn and to blaspheme. And he was free to do so. Christ respected their choices to do so, and he was free to do so. And so let's go on here. What can we learn? What can we learn from Christ's example? Well, we learn a couple of things. God determines his own decisions. God determines his own decisions. God the Father, of course, showed his determination, and Christ chose to fulfill all prophecy. Do you understand? In the life of Jesus Christ, he fulfilled more than 400 prophecies, some by his own will, and some that the Father fulfilled from heaven, such as, but not limited to, the prophecies of his birth. When Christ was born, there's 8 prophecies right there. And did Christ have anything to fulfill those? No, God the Father did. But according to the life of Christ, there are 400 prophecies, and many Christ himself completed by his own will. And listen, God's going to fulfill his will. We have the choice to surrender ourselves to help him fulfill that will, or he will fulfill that will with us, as with Christ, or against us, as the adversary, the devil. Okay, Satan. The word Satan means adversary. And even though we can be in an opposition of God, he will still fulfill his will. And so there's nothing you can do there. But God only determines his actions, his own actions. God does not determine our actions. You say, well, the argument can be made for Pharaoh. And that's a good argument until you take a closer look at it. Christ said that he would harden Pharaoh's heart. Now, the question is, did he harden Pharaoh's heart, or did he harden Pharaoh's will? Now, the Bible says he hardened his heart. Now, let's pretend like the heart and the will are synonymous. If the heart and the will are synonymous, then why does God teach us in Proverbs chapter 4 to keep our heart with all diligence? How can you make the decision to keep your heart if the decision maker is within the heart? That doesn't make sense. They would have to be independent of each other. The free will and the seat of your emotions, of your desires, of your feelings. Now, obviously, Pharaoh was a very fleshly man. He was a very carnal man. And he followed the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, everything that's in the heart. And that's why Jeremiah says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And we are not to trust in our heart. Please, my brother, don't follow the Disney philosophy of saying, what does your heart say? Or listening to your heart. No, we don't do that as Christians. Our heart is deceitful and carnal. And you will always fall into carnality. As why was God able to influence so mightily the decisions of Pharaoh? Because he followed his heart. Now, there's something to learn from that. God, as other people, can influence our decisions. He can influence them, but he can't make that decision for you. And how many times Paul witnessed to someone and said, I almost believed. He said, some believed, some didn't. And, a good example of how God influences our decisions, but doesn't make them for us, is in Revelation chapter 3 and verse number 20. Scroll down here to verse number 20. It says, behold, I stand at the door. This is Christ talking to the church. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. In other words, Christ is influencing us at the door. He's knocking. We always hear that knock at the door. And if we so choose, we may invite him in, and he will have dinner with us, and he will fellowship with us, and he can greater influence us. We can choose to have a greater influence of God in our lives if we so choose. And the decision is ours. The decision is ours. And so what does that mean? It means, like with Pharaoh, God can determine our circumstances, but he cannot determine our decisions. He cannot determine, because we're made in his image. Who can determine the decisions of God? No one. But we can influence him to make a decision. How can you influence God to make the right decision? That's why God says he will show mercy to whom he will, and he will not show mercy to whom. The decision is his. How do we influence God to show mercy to us? by calling on his name, by invoking his name, by pleading for mercy. And he's always showing mercy to those to plead mercy. We see that influences God quite a bit. The decision is his. And God has taught us through Scripture how he makes decisions, but the decision is his, just as the decision is yours. So what's your decision? Can you choose Christ? And those who have already chosen Christ by grace through faith, can you choose to follow him by his grace through faith in him? The decision's yours. And God determines his own actions. He does not determine our actions. We determine our own decisions, our own actions. Now, what does that mean? That means we live by our own determination. What does that mean? That also means that we're responsible. And that's what it comes down to. We're responsible for our decisions and our actions. And that's a comforting thing. That's also a very scary thing. And because a lot of times our actions are not always good. And you know what? But God has always determined good for us if we could just trust him and trust his will. And it's our choice to follow his will. John chapter 14 and verses 1 and 2, it says, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me." Talking to the Jews, you believe God, believe also in me. In verse number 2, it says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you." I go is the determination of Jesus Christ. And if he can determine to rise from the dead beyond the grave, he can definitely get that place prepared for us. And God has determined good for his people. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Woo! I love it, the determination of God. So if you came with me this far, God bless you. Thanks for being with me. And just listen, God is determined to do good. And to do good means that must be against evil. So those who do evil, obviously, God, in order to do good, has to be against evildoers. So please do his will so that you are not contrary to his will. Like when we talked about Balaam, he was contrary to the will of God. And but God was still glorified in all. And listen, if this was a blessing to you, by all means, share it. Share the video. Leave a reaction, a like, and a comment. I can't see it unless I see a comment. And hey, Justin Meyer, man, beware the flatterer. Okay, hey, Justin Meyer, good to see you, man. No, thank you for the compliment, brother. And God bless you. And I hope you're doing great over there. Are you still in South Dakota? And God bless you, man. Hope you're having a great time over there. And give my regards to the family. And so thank you, Brother Bain, for being with me this morning, and Brother Meyer. And God bless you guys. I hope you have an excellent day. And from Peru, ciao. Stay determined to do the will of God. Be determined to do so. And God bless you.